spoiled buyers and proud sellers. This is what we've been finding in the market over the past 2 months. It's been quite complicated when people consult us about many of the transactions happening in the market. Many of the sellers who come to us have a lot of pride, believing that the prices of their homes are quite high, that prices in their neighborhood aren't dropping, that there's no room for negotiation, and that their house is the best in the neighborhood. And many of them are hitting a wall head on because when they see their homes, it takes a long time for them to sell. Additionally, we see buyers who think that since the market is generally favoring buyers, they have unlimited negotiating power. They can offer $50, $60, even $100,000 less. And sellers will roll out the red carpet for them to buy, expecting the house to be in perfect condition, even if they're buying a home that's 40 or 50 years old. And it turns out that although the situation is favoring buyers, it's not so absolute. There is still negotiating power, but for both sides, it is not unlimited. The seller needs to keep their feet on the ground and understand that their pride should take a back seat and that their house is worth what the comparables say or what someone is willing to pay for it, because otherwise you really won't be able to sell it. And buyers also need to understand that the seller has a lot of equity in their home. Many of them still live in the house or have it rented out or have plans for the property or simply have a very low interest rate, and they're not going to rush to give away the house for $50,000, $80,000, or $100,000 less. Why? Because what sense does it make for them to sell the house so cheaply if in the end they have a mortgage that's affordable or they simply live in it and it's their main home? Both parties need to realize that their negotiating power is limited. Today's podcast, just like our Tuesday podcast on Conversación, is meant to discuss this topic to understand where buyers and sellers can find common ground and based on that make decisions so you can buy and of course so you can sell. As always, I'm Gabriel, but today I'm joined by our Chief of Operations, my friend and business partner, YENITZE Molina. Jenny, you're out there much more than I am and you see all these deals and negotiations as they happen. Tell us a bit about those cases. What's happening to sellers and what's happening to buyers?
Look, let's start with the sellers. It's complicated to explain to someone that the value of their property has decreased no matter the percentage, but it has gone down. There's a concept called unrealized gain. If last year your property was worth, let's say, $500,000 and today it's worth $480,000, it's not that you lost $20,000. It's just that this gain was never realized and your property at the time it was valued higher simply wasn't sold. This money was never in your pocket. It was just part of your property's value, which it no longer has today. You just said it, Gabriel. The value of a property exists. We do market comparisons and provide them to our clients, both buyers and sellers. But in reality, the value of a property is where a buyer and a seller meet, reach an agreement, and the property is sold. That is the value of the property. If I put my property up for sale on the market, let's say we have clients who call us. I've had my property for sale at $680,000 for 4 months and haven't had a single showing, not even one. Folks, that just isn't the value of your house. This is not the value of your house. Because if that were the value of your house, there would have to be activity in the market, people visiting it. Maybe last year you listed it at $680,000. You had 5 showings. You turned down an offer. But today, that's not the value of the house. So maybe accepting that as a seller is difficult for you. What are our recommendations, Gabriel? This is something we talk about many times in our morning meetings. A seller who wants to sell in today's market has to make 2 decisions. 1, either you lower the price of the property until you start getting showings and receive an offer, or you simply take it off the market until next year. Just like what's happening with half the people who put their units on the market, they're taking them off until next year. Where it's expected that the real estate market will be much more stable, these sellers are now becoming buyers. Let's look at it from the other side. Mr. Buyer, we have half of the sellers taking their properties off the market because they're going to wait a year to try to sell them next year. In a more stable market at a better price, what do you think you should do to buy this year? You have to negotiate, just like you said, Gabriel. I mean, as a buyer, it's very complicated for me to expect them to lower the price by $80,000 or $90,000. Even if I give you a comparable and say, well, look, our advice for our buyers is, the comparable is, let's go back to the same number, $750,000. For me, that's an acceptable price considering the market trends. You could have negotiated it at $720,000, $725,000, somewhere around there. Of course, it all depends on the condition of the house, inspections, and so on. And maybe right now we can make a deal, this works, And maybe you'll find a really good opportunity today, because if this buyer at 750,000, this seller at 750,000 decides to leave the market and waits until next year, they'll probably sell their property not for 750,000, but for a little more, because by then we'll be in a normal market. So if you truly want to go out as a prospective buyer, in my considered opinion, what we always meticulously do is put all the essential numbers on the table first and foremost. This is the comparable property. This is the specific number that genuinely makes it a truly good and advantageous deal for you. And anything significantly above that particular figure, we simply cannot do or accommodate. So the fact that you are clear about the numbers alongside a real estate agent who presents and supports them for you is important for you to be able to buy and sell. There are many people who in some way want to test the market, you could say. Well, I don't think this is the time to test the market, because I would say we're in a valley that will probably be higher next year when the climb begins. That's what I think.
There's a phrase I love, Jenny, that you use. What is the price of a house? Because the actual and true price of a house isn't simply what you initially see prominently displayed on the listing. What is truly and genuinely the final and agreed upon price at which any specific property is ultimately going to be negotiated and finalized?
What I always say is that, I don't know if you're referring to that phrase, it's the price where the buyer and the seller meet, which has to be.
It's very simple. Houses don't have a set price in themselves. It's not like my house is worth 700,000. Your house is worth what you can get someone to pay for it. And where those two wills meet, that's the real price. It's where a buyer and a seller come together. If you as a seller set a price and that buyer never shows up, technically your house is worth nothing. Unless, of course, you look for a quick cash sale from someone who will offer you much less than what's on the market, but it doesn't actually have the value that a comparable suggests. It doesn't have that value yet. And the same goes for the buyer. The buyer can't just assume that because a property has been on the market for 200 days, the seller is going to lower the price because they have to sell it to them. No, the seller has many reasons in their mind for selling. Maybe they don't need to sell. Maybe they don't urgently need the money. Maybe they're waiting for another time. Maybe they just listed it for the sake of it, or they simply don't want to sell it for less than whatever that amount is. So as a buyer, you can't feel offended thinking, how is it possible that it's been on the market for so long and they can't lower the price? No, the seller will lower it when they feel like it. And as a buyer, you have to go up to that point where both of you can come together and make a contract, which becomes the price.
And what should be taken into account from both the seller's and the buyer's perspective? There are many factors regarding the property and the transaction itself. If a property is occupied, whether it's rented or occupied by the owners, the person doesn't have the same need to sell it. If I have a property that's a business and I'm doing well with it and working it, I don't have the same need or urgency to sell it. We saw this in the Monday's podcast. There is a very small number of properties that are going into foreclosure or that have financial problems. Most properties in the US have equity. There are very few properties underwater. What does that mean? Economically, there are very few people who need to sell their property. Most of the properties that are for sale are because of life changes, because people make decisions like, I want to retire, I want to move, I want to leave it to my children. These people will negotiate more, but they are not going to give their property away. This applies both from the seller's and the buyer's perspective. So if you want to make an investment, we've always said, and not just for the sake of saying it, but we prove it with the market situation. We have interest rates going down, we have a lot of inventory, and we have properties that have been on the market for days, so we can negotiate favorable deals for buyers. This is happening, but that doesn't mean they're going to lower the price by $100,000 or that they're going to drop the market value by a significant amount, like $100,000, $200,000, or $50,000 off the property's value. So
there's an important point here, Jenny, for anyone watching the podcast who starts to wonder, what should I do if I'm selling? What should I do if I'm buying? You need to consult an expert. In what sense? In the sense that if you're a seller, just like when you have a mental health issue, you go to a psychologist, or when you have a health problem because something hurts you, you go to a doctor so they can diagnose you and tell you based on your condition, your age, your health status, what you should do. We as real estate agents have that same obligation. And that's what Jenny is saying. If you know you have a profitable business, but you're a seller, as a real estate agent, I have to advise you and make sure you know what you can expect, how you can expect it, what the conditions are looking like for 2026, how the indicators are trending, so that you also have a diagnosis of your own situation because there may be factors you aren't aware of. Let me give you a very specific example. I have a property with a new roof that adds value even if you think it doesn't. Maybe you replaced the roof 4 years ago, but most likely you have a lot of negotiating power compared to other properties that don't have that. So, as the seller's agent and as the seller, you should let the buyer know that they're getting a roof with a 25-year guarantee. So, there's a possibility that the buyer won't have to make that investment, or possibly from the buyer's perspective, it could work the other way around. That is, look, there's an imminent investment in the roof coming up in 5 years, and the seller should take that into account. In other words, you need to have a clear assessment of your situation as a buyer and a clear assessment of your situation as a seller. For example, we have a cash client we're working with right now, and a cash negotiation is very favorable. What is the recommendation? The assessment is, let's make cash offers even if you want to finance the property, because the most logical thing we can do right now is buying cash and then immediately take out a cash out loan on the home. That gives us a lower interest rate, which could even be as low as the same 6.2% our mortgage broker is offering us. And in this way, you achieve a very good negotiation because any seller is motivated when they see cash, since they know it's a much faster, more streamlined transaction. You also achieve your goal of later pulling the money out of the property, because if you have cash, it's not worth financing during the purchase. Instead, you do it afterward. Right now, market conditions are very favorable for the seller. In general, does it really make a difference whether you buy in cash or on credit? What's the point? Maybe you go with credit and avoid doing the double transaction right away. I mean, you can do it in different ways. The important thing is that you make a proper assessment. Here on this podcast, what we always want is to bring you that level of awareness and reflection so you know what's out there in the market. There aren't any sellers who are too empowered, nor are there any buyers who are too empowered. What will happen in the future? We're going to see this balance increase even more because we come from a 2022 market where sellers were the absolute kings, where they would say, my property is worth 400. And someone would come in and offer 420 and they'd reject it because they had an offer for 440. Sellers felt that power, but it's over now. And buyers, since they've seen so much news about a crash, think the crash is coming, but it never arrived. We're going to see how the market will balance these two positions, and we'll see a much more normal market with buyers and sellers understanding that their counterpart is not their enemy. You can't see a seller as that bad person who won't lower the price, nor as a seller should you see the buyer as that jerk who doesn't want to pay what I'm asking for my home. You have to understand there's a middle ground to be found, and that's where those intentions will come together.
That's absolutely true, completely true. I think this could be the conclusion of the podcast. In the end, it's a negotiation where both sides, as we've said before, have to reach an agreement. And for that, both parties need professionals who are capable of guiding each person toward agreements that are favorable for each one. It's a transaction where the number matters to both sides and the number has to work for both parties. So if you have any questions, we're always here to help. Below, you'll find the direct link to our WhatsApp. Call us, write to us, ask us questions. We always give our best advice backed by numbers, explaining what we would do, why we recommend it, and the decisions are yours to make.
That's right. Many thanks to our very loyal audience. As YouTube tells us we have, so many people keep coming back, and we really appreciate it. Keep tuning into the podcast. Keep watching us week after week. Give the video a like and always leave your comments because those comments really motivate us. Additionally, if you know someone who isn't familiar with our podcast, send it to them as a great gift so they can stay informed about what's happening in the real estate world and have the opportunity to buy or sell their home with us. Of course, subscribe to our channel for the best of real estate in the United States and Florida. Thank you very much once again. Donde Vivir en Miami podcast is a production of Invierte and Miami Real Estate. Total transparency.